Pleasure to have you. My name is Jessie Resurrection. I major in marketing management and I minor in business law and business management. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is John Flesey. I'm a bishop in the Catholic Church, and I'm in residence at Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. I was the pastor here for a number of years, and now I'm emeritus, which is a fancy word for retired. But I'm pretty active in my retirement, so I'm not sure I can tell the difference yet, but so that's where I am now.
It's wonderful to hear, sir. And before going into our interview, I'd like to check that you also signed our waiver, correct?
That's correct.
All right, that sounds great. And now we're going to conduct our interview. And would you
Okay.
please, thank you. Would you please describe your childhood, your family, and what your life was like before you went to St. Peter's University?
Okay. I was the youngest of three children. We grew up in Jersey City. So Jersey City was my home. And I have two older sisters, one recently deceased. And we lived in Bergen Avenue in Jersey City, not far from what was then the CYO Center. I think there's a school down there now. I don't know if the CYO Center still exists, and then when I was about 10, we moved up to Kennedy Boulevard, 2540 Kennedy Boulevard, next to the bank, which is 3 blocks from, I think, St. Peter's College, and 2 buildings away from St. Dominic Academy, where both my sisters went to high school. So they really couldn't complain about how far they had to travel to go to school, because I think it was less than 100 yards to the entrance to the academy. And for me, it was only 3 blocks to the college. I went to St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, and I enjoyed that experience very much. It was great. And that's why I didn't even give it a second thought when I realized I could go to St. Peter's College, and it was so nearby. And it was in the same spirit of the Jesuits that I had in high school. So that's why I chose to go there. There really wasn't, in my mind, I didn't even think of an alternative.
Oh, that's great to hear, sir. Also kept my education within Jersey City. I initially went to Marist High School, and then I went to St. Peter's University with my cousin. It was a bit of a transition from Marcelin Champagnat's mission statement into the Jesuit one, and I must say I appreciate both of them.
Yes, now you graduated from Marist, did you?
I actually did.
Yeah. The reason I say that is because the priest I'm assigned with here, who succeeded me, not only is a graduate of Marist, but he is a graduate of St. Peter's College,
Oh,
now, of course, university, and he's outstanding, very, very talented fellow. So I'm very appreciative of Marist and all that it accomplished. And a lot of 3 or 4 of my close colleagues over the years who I worked with were also graduates of Marist, and very impressive in their talents and abilities. So it was a great school. I was so disappointed to know it wasn't going to continue. But the cost of running schools today is so expensive that can happen.
I agree with you. It has a lot of strong points, and I believe it made a lot of incredible individuals, and I thank them so much for my education. And it's quite saddening to know that that Marist High School closed, but I'm very glad that it had a wonderful legacy.
Oh, absolutely. And the legacy lives on. Absolutely.
I agree. And what brought you to St. Peter's College?
Well, as I said before, I was, one, I lived 3 blocks away. And 2, I was a graduate of the Jesuit high school and really enjoyed 4 years there. And so there was nothing I was specifically sure I might want to do. So I was happy to go to a college nearby. And also, I realized it was saving my family the money and tuition that it would have cost room and board to go away to school. And I was content with that. We had a lovely apartment about 3 blocks away, and I had my own space and room. So it was almost, my parents both worked. So during the day, a lot of times I was completely free to do my work in the apartment, etc. So I was more than content to do it that way.
That's good to hear, sir. And what impact has having a Jesuit education have on your life?
Well, obviously, I ended up being a Catholic priest and a bishop, so it didn't undermine me too much.
I wouldn't think so.
It was the Ignatian spirit, the spirit of the spiritual exercises and the life of Ignatius, and the commitment to that the exercises of self-awareness and your relationship with God. These were all values in my life. And at St. Peter's, on a regular basis, I went to Mass there in the local chapel. Almost most days that I was free to do so, I did. So and I was involved in St. Aidan's Parish, which of course is now part of the university.
Right.
And I was involved there as a catechetical teacher and involved in a lot of the liturgies and ceremonies. So I wasn't really actively involved in a lot of things at the college, other than what I was doing in that parish.
I understand. What larger societal issues occurred while you were at St. Peter's?
Wow. This is where the Pandora's box opens up. First of all, the event was the assassination of John Kennedy, President of the United States.
Right.
In 1963. That was the event to top all events. And not till the Twin Towers came down did I see anything remotely like it. It just was the shock to everybody. And it's one of those, I remember what seat I was sitting in when I vividly remember what happened for the next 5 minutes. So it just shows you how it impacted our lives. But there were many other events that did too. One was Martin Luther King, who was, I think at that point, I may have some of these dates confused, had been arrested in the South. And what I never knew then was that I would one day have the opportunity to meet him.
You did?
Yes, about 5 years later. That's
Wow.
the last thing in the world I would ever have anticipated. The other thing was that other events that went on, where religiously there was the Second Vatican Council took place from 62 to 65. That was a big religious event taking place, which is still the biggest event of its kind in the Catholic Church back to all those years. And there was also the founding of the conservative political movement, which probably was a reaction to the civil rights in the South and Martin Luther King. And it was started by Barry Goldwater. And I think that was in my senior year. And that's continuing. That's what we see today has continued to grow and evolve in the Republican Party. So there was a lot. And the other thing I would say is the change in women's relationship to education. And I saw it in my own family. My sister, who's 6 years ahead of me, when she graduated from St. Dominic Academy, I don't think the thought at that time was to go to college for women, even though she was an outstanding student and graduated at the age of 16.
Wow.
So she went to New York and she got a job went to Berkeley at secretarial school. And before she finished the first year, they invited her to take a job at Lever Brothers, and they gave her early graduation so she could go and be a secretary to one of the managers in Lever Brothers in New York. And from there, she went on to be the secretary to the president of he was the head of the Wall Street Club, and he was the head of one of the big executives, and he was a big executive in the Wall Street area. And during that time, the thought came to her mind, maybe I should try going to college. So she was one of the first students, I think, first years when St. Peter's opened at night. She went there as a night student. And in fact, in my senior yearbook, if you look in the back, way back, there's a picture of a few women going to night school, and she's one of them. And in 1968, 4 years later after I graduated, she graduated. And she might have been the first night student to be offered fellowships and assistantships to college, to two colleges. One was Boston University, and the other one was the University of Maryland. And it was one of the professors, one of the English teachers, who strongly recommended her and encouraged her to go. And so she left her life as a secretary in Wall Street and and she headed down to the University of Maryland, from which she got her master's degree and became a college professor for the next 20 years.
Wow.
That's all the result of going to St. Peter's College at night. And of course, now that her daughters, who are an engineer from Johns Hopkins and a doctor of pharmacy from the University of Maryland, they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for St. Peter's College encouraging her to go to graduate school. So that's an example of the cultural impact during those years of women's education radically changing. And she was one of the prime examples of it. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah,
and of course, there was a little thing like the war in Vietnam, right? That also happened, and some of my classmates went over there, and I know at least one lost his life there. So all these events were happening at the same in those 4 years. It was power packed. Of course, we didn't realize the full significance of each of them at the time. But in hindsight, it's clear just how much was happening of a radical nature that's still impacting us today. So outside of that, it was pretty dull.
I agree with you entirely, and my condolences for your friend who lost his life.
Oh, thank you.
At the war.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate his service too.
Yeah. So that. I would say those were the cultural events of the time.
I understand. And we have one other question, which is, why is St. Peter's University an important institution for higher learning?
Well, first of all, when I look back, it gave me the opportunity. And I look at, there's a question there I know about friendships and stuff. I noticed that some of the people who were friends of mine, there was Bill, for example. Bill McCarran went from St. Peter's College to Stanford Law School. My friend Henry went from St. Peter's College to a Fulbright scholarship, 2 years studying in Europe, and got a doctorate in languages from Northwestern University, and just finished 45 years as a professor at the University of North Carolina in Asheville. So another friend, John Daly, went to Columbia Medical School after St. Peter's. So it gave people an unsurpassed opportunity to move into the future. And many of them took advantage of it and were very, very talented, as those stories indicate, were very talented people. Another one, Dennis. Dennis went on to St. John's Law School, and we've kept contact on and off. In fact, just before the pandemic hit, he and I got together for dinner. So as the song says, still crazy after all these years. So there's examples of the interconnectedness of people. And that was another rich reward, was the friendships that were lasting. Sometimes I didn't see somebody for a long time, even years, but when you did, it ignited the connection that you had. And I felt there were very talented people I was in class with, and I was very honored to be with them. And I look back that St. Peter's opened the door to the future. And I think that's what it's doing for a whole different kind of population, but that's the secret. Will they open the door to the future and what could be? And I think it is, as your own situation indicates, it's clearly offering that opportunity. And I think that's fabulous and wonderful. Though there are challenges ahead that were much more difficult than what I saw in my time. And this is going to be one of the key ingredients. People of your generation are going to have to face, maybe sooner than we think, challenges that I think could be pretty dramatic. Does democracy have a future? And are we ever going to deal with this climate change or continue to be in denial? One of the things I didn't realize when I graduated from St. Peter's, by the way, that it was going to be, I had no thought of going to school other than that, except then I got the desire. I continued to think about possibly being a priest. What I didn't know was that I would end up having 5 degrees, 4 more after that one. So I ended up with 4 more degrees. It seemed like every 5 years I decided I need to study something else. So, and so there's an example. It was the basis for all that I did afterwards.
That sounds great to hear, sir. And would you have any concluding words for the future generations of St. Peter's University students, or even for the audience now?
Well, of course, I'm a man of faith, so I'm a great believer in Jesus and his way of life. And two things. One is what a writer by the name of, it escapes me for a second, who was a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. And he wrote a book called, Viktor Frankl, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he said about the United States something which at the time struck me, and now I see more and more is truer and truer. He said the United States has a Statue of Liberty, but it doesn't have a Statue of Responsibility.
Ooh.
And that struck me so intensely. And I think he said, without responsibility, you eventually lose your freedom. So I think that's, I hope the students are able to be free. Yes, freedom is a value, but I hope they equally value responsibility in the use of that freedom, because right now it seems to be lacking, and the consequences will be enormous if we don't respond to that. And of course, I believe in my own faith, that my faith gives me the ability to do that. But it's also the challenge of doing it, no matter how right you think it is. So I wish them all the best, and God bless them on that journey.
Thank you, sir. And before anything else, would you like to go into those challenges you were speaking about and the responsibilities specifically?
Well, I mean, I was never a science student, but I had a wedding in California, and the father of the groom was a well-known research scientist who was working, who also was working for NASA, and the astronauts. And I asked him, this is 12 years ago, and I asked him, is this stuff about climate change real or exaggerated? And he said, it's too frightening to imagine the future. But people are in complete denial, and if they don't watch out, there won't be a future. So, so I said, when you think of that and this was a renowned physicist. So that stuck with me ever since. And one of the people I admire most, Pope Francis, has been saying this since he first took office. Be aware, this planet is only going to be around for so long if we don't care for it now. And he's been pushing and pushing on this issue. Unfortunately, Americans, even no matter what the damage that seems to be coming to the country because of it, they don't seem to believe in it. They still feel that it's not true. My fear is that the fear of the loss of money will blind us to the, I have to keep doing this because I'm making a lot of money doing it, and I can't change these way of doing things. Well, if the planet no longer exists, it's not going to matter, So that's a fear I have. And the other fear I have is for democracy. I see it slipping away. That attack on January 6th, to me, that was the end of democracy in the United States. It's over. Whether or not it chooses to revive, I don't know. But right now, I see increasingly people who are extremely manipulative. One of the degrees I got was in counseling. And later on, I did my doctoral dissertation on the relationship between theology and psychology. And one of the things that I clearly saw was how the defense mechanisms, as they call them in psychology, the unconscious defense mechanisms, once you know what they are so prevalent in society to a very frightening degree. First, denial. When the truth is staring you in the face, you just deny it. Two, rationalization, which is a good reason to do a bad thing, right? And this, I see, that attack on the Capitol was a perfect example of rationalization. People claiming they had good reasons to do a bad thing. The third thing is projection or blaming others.
Yep.
And of course, we see this, the whole history of the United States. Unfortunately, I was a history major, but it wasn't until one day I was reading, I had a long drive. A friend of mine is an historian, gave me he said, listen to this book. So it was on the CD, so I wrote along. And as I was listening, the historian said something which I had never quite heard put this way before. He said, the most significant idea in the history of the United States is not democracy, and it's not capitalism, it's white supremacy. And I thought, that is so true. Wow, that's what slavery was about. That's what, unfortunately, the eradication of the Indians was about, not only here, but in Canada. And this whole notion of a superior race, I just had never quite real, and now I look back on the history I had read all those years, and I was blind to that. But when that remark was made in that book, and that's well before what's going on today. And so I would just say that that's tragic and sad, you know. So I hope we're able to, you know, the good thing for me is that I turn on the TV, and very often when they have these experts come on who are health people, I just noticed how many of them were women, and two, how many of them were women that looked like they came from minority backgrounds. Either they came from India or South America or something. And here they were holding these high medical positions at universities. And so I said, well, that's hope for the future. That's hope for the future. Okay, that's it, I think.
Very much so. Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure to listen to you, and I especially like how you got into that topic. I thought you went definitely beyond the Call of Duty when it came to this interview, and I appreciate listening to your story.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'll be thinking of you, and God bless you in the future, everything you do.
Thank you so much. God bless you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.